live.
You hear that though?
Yeah, I can hear that. Everything's good there.
If the microphone's working, I can hear it fine. I can hear you fine.
Sweet.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
You need to prepare or, center. Do you like to center yourself? I don't know how Boys Cast does it.
We just do it here. We actually we don't have like a producer or anything. It was just we just do all the cameras and I upload the footage.
Really? Okay, come on. Because once I saw, I started to have suspicions once I saw Danny's show. Because it's clearly he's using a picture of this room, but he's got to be in this epic
he's here
warehouse. Yeah, it's like a warehouse. You guys have a shared space, right? Or
no, it's just an apartment, but it's like an apartment that's just for podcasting.
That's awesome. Just how many people use it? Is it just you guys?
No, I split it with two girls that do a podcast called Guys We Fucked.
That's brilliant. See, there you go.
Corinne Fisher. So yeah, they have their set. We have our set here. And then their set's over there.
Oh,
cameras in here.
That's brilliant.
But we also have a wall there where we can shoot stuff, and then Danny puts a green screen over there.
See, I wish more people did that. Just built a little community, a little tiny collective, and they're doing their thing, you're doing your thing, but it jives in a way.
Yeah, I come here and work 2 or 3 days a week too.
To help with their stuff, their shticks.
No. They use it Monday. Danny does Tuesday, I do Wednesday, and then usually Thursday, Friday, I come here and work on my normal stuff.
Oh, you do your thing. So it's like an office, it's fully like an office.
I treat it like an office. Yeah.
Yeah. It's rad. Well, okay. I mean, hello. Do you want to we could just start, or how do you feel?
Yeah.
Cool.
That sounds good.
World. This is Ryan Long. I think you know him. He's pretty famous amongst my friends, I think. Even before that though, you were in you did videos for the Hard Times, right?
Yeah.
That blows my mind. I want to go back and see. I might pull up a picture of that actually.
Are you a musician? I
am a musician, and I was a video guy for a lot of punk bands. I actually found your the Ryan tags, and you can see it's hard to find some of your videos now from the Hard Times days because the videos have been.
I have some of them on my YouTube now too, though. The biggest one we did was Bass Player Support Group, and
that's the real.
Yeah, that one did 10 million views, and then I did the Ally Weekly that actually did 400,000 or 500,000 on my page, and then we did I did Soundman, The Art of Grumpy, and that was a really huge one too. Those were probably the two biggest.
And now you're doing basically you took Hard Times kind of and Onion and stuff to Kickstarter level. I noticed a lot of the music behind your videos now, it's you're selling something, but you're selling this ideology, and it's just freaking brilliant. So I don't know.
There was a step in between. I was doing that all before by myself, and then I went to the then I was doing a bunch of music related videos. Then I started doing those at the Hard Times. But before any of that, I'd already had TV shows and stuff like that. I had a TV show, Ali G show kind of sort of situation.
Oh yeah, based.
And then I had a Jackass sort of thing going on. And then I started doing the Hard Times stuff. And then after that, I did 2 different digital series at the CBC in Canada, which is the Canadian Broadcast Corporation. I did the show called Trontopia, and then I did a show called That Guy. And then I was doing about as wild stuff I can there, but there's some stuff that I did there that I put on my channel now that did really well after the fact. I did one about bouncers. They were these progressive bouncers. That was the whole bit was, we don't care whether you're black, white, or brown. Everyone's getting beat up. We're assholes to everyone equally, kind of thing. That's the basic premise.
Classic equal opportunity hater, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. But that one I thought was, the premise was, I think it was pretty funny, but more so it was, the thing was I hired proper actors. So I casted, and one of the guys, he was in Iron Man and Avengers, and he's like a known like villain in movies, that I casted this guy Rob Archer. He's like 7 feet tall, tattooed, and I still like kind of keep in touch with him. And like so I casted like actual like guys that look like bouncers that were like huge. So I don't know, for me, something about that, like that idea where you make a video that like really seems like it was made for real. So that, to go back to like Carmel, you said before, of when you're putting it's not that it's sales music, although I do sometimes use corporate music. It's like branded content document. So it's like they are selling something, but it's more, it's like, as if you're doing like an inspirational story on like, this woman who overcame cancer. Like it's very, and I had a production company in Canada that I've made a ton of those videos. So a lot of and I edited a ton of them too. So I'm actually, a lot of the stuff I do, like the thing I'm making fun of, I've made the real video. So it's like these kind of like weird genre pieces.
You're a total expert. No, but
well, think about this. Like, okay, so imagine you're making like a comedy action movie, right? Like one way to do it is to hire like lots of comedy people, and then you kind of figure out how to do action. Or another way to do it is to like hire a guy who's like expertise is making action films, and you go, we want this to be exactly like the action films, but it'll be a comedy. You know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like even I have like an editor, and one of the big things I'm always talking about is like, don't think of this as being funny. Try to put your headspace as if you were like making it for real, and you have to trust that like your script and idea was funny. But once you're like making it, you make it the way that as if you were making it for real.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm just making garbage, and like, yeah, some things I make are shit and I just fucking churned it out and whatever. Like it sort of becomes second nature. And sometimes you just have like a 1-note video, like that you want to make one point, and you just kind of like put it through your mill to make your point or make your joke or whatever.
That's
but like
so
sometimes
LA.
Well, like let's say I did this one recently where when everyone was mad at Joe Rogan for the Neil Young stuff, right? He basically put his music on Amazon, and then I did this video being like, hey, I think that everyone needs to, cancel Spotify and join Amazon, like a true ethical company. And the only way to, be on the right side of this is everyone should, cancel your local bodega and shop at Amazon, whatever. Right. But you're making, so that one, like I can do that in 2 hours. That's not, some big project, but
you have
like,
to do it in 2 hours because the joke has to be right now. So like a lot of your material is, so this is something I've been thinking about Canada in general. Canadians just annoy Americans by accident, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. Is it because you guys are nice or something?
Like, yeah.
Well, just on principle, Canadians, there's fewer of you, yet you guys work harder at making quality content.
Do you mean in America? Like,
yeah.
Do you mean like people who immigrated here?
I think it's just in general. I mean, I personally grew up like obsessed.
But
with
you mean Americans
Degrassi.
that are in Canada, right? Oh no, you mean American Canadians that are in Canada.
I think the Americana is offended by how successful Canadians are at making entertainment culture and working in general. Because you guys are like, look at how many Saturday Night Live people come from Canada. Look at how many of the best people come from Canada.
Well, that like specific brand of sketch comedy, the like Lorne Michaels brand, was very Canadian, and the Second City was in the heart of Second City was in the heart of Toronto, right? There was the Chicago one and the Toronto one, but I do think about, so there's two parts. The first part is that I feel like that there is the like immigrant component where, the same reason why you're like, well, why are Indians so successful in Silicon Valley? And you're
why
like, well,
yeah, the Canadians taking our jobs.
Yeah, but it's like the ones that come there are, you know what I mean? There's still like millions and millions of Indians that like aren't successful in India. But so there's plenty of lazy, Canadians and everything.
But that's even worse
still in Canada, right?
Because there's like
you just don't. You've never heard about them.
No, we're out for a rip. We know you guys are out for a rip.
But you only know the ones that are successful, right? So there's like a selection bias.
No, I mean I think there's 30-40 million Canadians, and the way I see it is Canada's got 10 million people that are working for the world, for the Queen in some way. By the way, happy Queen's birthday. That's the Queen's birthday today. I guess.
Oh, really?
The Queen of Canada. See, but yeah, as a Canadian, you can be like, oh, really? And I don't even know. Are you lying? Do you know the Queen's birthday? Or are you a
No,
spy?
I don't.
Have you seen that?
What day
show,
is it? April 21st? I don't know that. But the
Have you
second
seen-
thing. Oh, sorry.
the day after the other one. Have you seen the Queen's? Have you seen the movie The Experts about? I'm talking about with
No.
John Travolta. Hold on, let me see if I can find this really quickly. So there's this movie called The Experts. Let me see. There we go. It's about the John Travolta and Ari Gross, which I'm pretty sure he's from Canada as well, ended up waking up in the middle of the night. They're at a nightclub in New York City or Toronto, and then they end up waking up in this 50s town, Indian Springs, Nebraska. Only they realize it's the Soviet Union gulag that's training people to think they're in America, right? And so they have to. And this is like, is this not what Canada is? Is this not Degrassi? I mean, really, like Canada is this big British mind control spy program designed to raise people that could come off as Americans
and pretend as American.
Yeah, dude, the experts.
That's the comedy part. So there's two types of, there's like lots of different types of comedy. And what you described was like kind of, hipster sketch comedy of the 70s, right? So whenever comedy gets satirical, big in your face, like bold comedians, they're all American, right? So, the Sam Kinnisons of the world, there isn't very many of those that are from Canada. So I know that, and this isn't like always a rule, but Canadians are, as much as they are passable as Americans, they're a mix humor wise between Canadian and America. So I've always described it as like Americans all about like overselling less. So let's say your joke's a 7, comedians will like do it like it's a 9, and British humor is very like underselling big. So if your joke's a 9, you would do it like a 7. So you kind of like throw away like what would be a bigger joke. So a lot of times like very like American specials, I feel like is the joke is said with like more confidence than it is good.
Yeah, confidence. But you're selling something. Yeah, but the British...
you're selling. Yeah, and not to say the jokes are better. There's a lot of, sometimes it's a 5 being sold as a 3 or versus a 5 being sold as a 7. So it's not always, one's better than the other, like at its core, like a lot of times it's the same.
How do you
But I think that's just like stylistically. So I think that whenever like culture goes through waves, where the same way that like music goes through like harder, softer, comedy goes through waves. And when it starts to get sort of like more like sarcastic and hipster, I think that Canadians like capture that better because they have like a British sensibility.
Do you think that the French influences? I mean, like, because again, I talk a lot.
I don't think the French influence anything.
That's, it's weird. They say Canada could have had French food, American technology, and British culture. Is that right? And then they ended up with British food, French technology, and American culture. I think that's what happened in Canada.
Yeah. But, I mean, Quebec French food is like poutines and hot dogs and shit.
Hey,
so
I have to be careful saying I love poutine because it might get Google translated wrong, but I do love the way gravy goes on fries in Canada.
No, it's great, but that's exactly what you said. That's like an American fucking dish. Like, I'm surprised it's not bigger here, because if you think about it, that's not like some like hoity-toity French thing. That's fucking like American slop.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Arcadians got their Peruvian potatoes, and I mean, imagine French food without Vietnamese influence. There's just dead quails and snails. It's not okay. I mean, once you give them some ingredients, the French do a lot better. But okay, I get the point. Yeah. The French aren't loved, even though the peanut butter experiment was a great movie.
You know more about history than me. I feel like I look at, because even it's interesting like how people kind of look at the world. Like I can tell when we're talking like everything sort of, you kind of look through the world of like history and how
I hold a grudge. I hold a grudge for 1,000 years. Like
I don't think it's bad. I think it's a good way to. I don't think that any of them is good or bad. I mean, I look at everything through the realm of like culture. I think like I'm always comparing things back to music, or I could look at a relationship and it'd be like, well, it's kind of like how when a comedian does it. Like, so it's just my frame of reference for everything, because that's like all I think about. And I think I have a friend, the guy who runs the Hard Times, actually, Matt Sincombe. I always thought it was interesting that he looks through everything through the realm of hardcore music, because that was just so his life and identity. And so I remember, so now he, you know, he runs like a tech company or multiple tech companies, and he's a very successful guy. And it always was funny to me that like he would be kind of like in these big meetings about tech, and he's kind of talking about it. And he was like, yeah, it's kind of like in hardcore when we used to sell t-shirts. One way to do it is like everything with him is like back to the hardcore scene, you know, the same way that like a company has dissent would always be like, well, in the hardcore scene, we had these two people. So I think that it's always just good to like, anyone who's like an expert at anything, everything's the same in a lot of ways because it's all just human nature. So becoming like really, you understand one thing extremely well really does like allow you to understand everything else extremely well in a lot of times.
But in like a weird, I've got my, you know, it's like racism, you know, it's like, I remember in House of Cards, there's this old senator, he's driving and they're calling him a racist, but it's this post-Obama period racism. So he's supposed to be this old white guy. And he's like, oh man, I'm sorry I was late. The guy in front of me was driving like a Hawaiian, quote unquote. And the idea is that we don't know what that means anymore. So what happens is I've created, you know, I could be obsessed with baseball, but instead I'm obsessed with history because history repeats itself. But it does it really? Because some of the times you're like, just this looks very similar to something in history.
No, the things don't repeat themselves, but the human principles do.
Yeah.
So you're always looking at the human element through those lenses. So if you look at why, like if you're talking about the Hawaiian thing, yeah, that word, but that's the same reason as like, yeah, like jazz isn't popular, but if you look at why people liked it and why it was impactful, that still rings true. It's just the actual players change. So yeah, that same stereotype situation is just happening with Asians. So it does repeat itself. It just like the original thing stops remaining to be relevant.
Do you remember when Alan Thicke was predicted? Well, they said he was dead from like a heart attack during a hockey game. And he wasn't, and then the next day he died at a hockey game. Let me see if I can find that. Somewhere.
That's wild. Yeah, I actually didn't hear that. I'm more of a Robin Thicke guy, but
that's fair, right? Well, that's I think the other thing is right around that same time his son became super famous. But so there's a number of things like that makes a lot of sense, that someone's preparing for a politician to win and they have articles in a folder ready to put up if they're going to put it up because they want to be the first to publish. So you want to have the story ready at the second that.
Well, I remember, you know, working in comedy. I mean, most places, if they're covering an election very closely, they'll have, you know, let's say sketches ready to go for both.
Right. I mean, there was that show, That's My Bush, that Trey Parker and Matt Stone made, which is a sitcom about the president. And it was written to be That's My Gore or That's My Bush, depending on who won. And they just rushed with it. But
they changed a lot of things in the South Park season when Trump won because they didn't think he was going to win.
Yeah, which I gotta wonder about I wish they'd just gone with their narrative. But Bloomberg accidentally reports that Russia invaded Ukraine. This is now true, kind of like Alan Thicke dying, but this is February 4th, 2022. So they were thinking it was going to happen. They put it up and it was a little early, you know, and then it's true. Now, similarly, in the last few days, I think it was yesterday. Yeah. Taiwan.
You can make it true. Like you start telling people that a couple broke up and then you get all that info out there.
That's what I'm asking you. Do you think that, do you feel like, because there was in history, the Spanish American War, they just published a bunch of newspapers saying it was happening before it was happening. And that made it happen, you know? So are we doing predictive programming here with the Taiwan?
I think it's percentages. So if you were to say, is there an objective reality, you would be able to, and not, you know, the people try to get the closest that they can, but you go, what was the percentage that it was possible that they were going to invade? So that does exist. Was it 80%? Was it 50% at the time? And then that changes every day. And then you said, what does that have an effect on it? Did that change the percent? Did it change it 1% culturally? Did it change it 0.1%? So I think the answer is everything does have an effect because it's all moving unison, but, does something like that have a huge effect? I guess that's possible, but not in all cases.
Right. Okay. So I get okay. That leads me into
That's like a
weirder
super
question.
boring, like pragmatic,
No,
like
man.
realistic
Actually,
approach. But
let's bring it to flow state. No, I like how you look at jokes like baseball scores also, because
I do, yeah.
you have to metric things. I like how you metric things.
Yeah, you have to metric everything. Yeah.
So maybe expand on that. I know you went to Guelph. How long have you been metricing? What happened why do you think in things in terms of their scores, and what does that mean to you?
Well, in terms, you want to speak for a second?
Yeah, sure. Wait, say what?
Oh, sorry. I thought my headphones went out, but I think
oh
the
yeah,
thing
yeah.
just went
There
out.
was
Sorry.
a quick glitch. It's because they knew that you were about to say something important.
Well, to go back to my original like theory, so I feel like my like identity and my the way that I do everything is like almost formed through music. So I almost do comedy like I do drums or whatever. But I was always like I went to school for economics, math economics. So like I think I was like I think my brain just works fairly in terms of like equilibriums and stuff like that. So it's like no, I don't want to say like you're always just looking for the truth, but there is a truth when it's like when people like a lot of people like to say like art's subjective, and I don't really like think that's true. I just
Agreed,
think
yeah.
that they were missing why, like when they say that they go, well, I like this better. And it's like, well, that's fine, but why? And that there is still like an objectivity to it. And I think that kind of is the same, probably debate the world's having right now is like, how much objectiveness is there? Where like, if you say, oh, there's this girl's, hot, and they go, no, this girl's beautiful and every girl's beautiful or whatever. And you go, well, do you believe that there's no objective standard of beauty? And they would be like, well, but this guy thinks she's hotter and this guy thinks she's hotter, therefore there is no objective standard. And I would always say, like, in my opinion, that doesn't matter. The same, like there is,
all I see is golden ratios.
Yeah, I really do. And it's like they're just missing whenever they're missing factors a lot of times too. So as a comedian, there's so many times where like, let's say a musician right now, if there was a band that was, for example, really like the best band in the world, there's like a pretty good chance no one could care because most bands aren't famous. Like, whereas if you're a DJ that like got in with the right friends and you were in LA, you could be much more popular, right? So the one assumes that like art lives kind of like in absence of everything else. But in my opinion, the cultural component's like a huge component. So it's like, yeah, if you remove like culture and act like that doesn't matter, then you might say this thing's better. But if you consider that a part of it, then it's a huge thing. So same with girls, you could be like, okay, well, cultural standards are different everywhere, therefore it doesn't matter. And it's like, well, no, cultural standards matter for that reason, where the same reason, like when I was in high school or whatever, growing up, I was this like, tattooed kind of, whatever type of
long-haired weirdo, you can say it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But I wouldn't have been there if I lived somewhere where like that wasn't cool.
Yeah, but that's also brings me back to the vote, the rating of Canada.
Or at least girls liked it or whatever. I thought, or I was part of a seat.
There's too many,
it's not like it was out of nowhere.
There's too many good artists in Canada. And so that's what I think why you had to go to New York. It's no offense to New York, but New York is,
of course, no, you can't make it. You can't make it work in Canada
because there's too many good people in Canada. That's what it looks like.
No, it's not because of that. There's no industry. No, it's not. There's no industry. The same reason you want to be if you want to go be the greatest, like fucking baseball player, but you want to live in Nigeria, like no one's ever gonna care. Like,
it seems like the industry,
move to America and be in the MLB.
But the industry,
you want to be in the. So can you be the best basketball player in the world without living in America?
Well, I guess not. I don't
know. Okay, that's everything. Well, I guess it's Hollywood, right? If you want to be, the internet makes it different in the sense that there are people that are, popular and social media people, but it's like these things do matter. Like there's Comedy Cell in the Comedy Store and these places. They are, comedy is a very, peer-reviewed art form in the sense, the same reason why, culture happens in pockets, and like your like contextualization as a part of history is only going to matter if you are, geographically part of that for at least a period. I think a lot of people do that and then they sort of remove themselves from it and they were there enough, but like to just never be part of the same, the same reason why to never be part of the NBA means you'll never have mattered in the history of basketball, to never be part of the American, comedy scene will mean you never matter to the American comedy scene, which matters to everyone. I think that even if you talk about British comedians like Ricky Gervais and Russell Brand, who are the biggest like British comedians, it's like they only matter really in Hollywood because they were in Hollywood.
It's true. I mean, Eddie Izzard comes to mind for that as well. But Canada does have the industry. So growing up,
no, it doesn't. It does not.
Okay. So from my perspective, as a kid in California who wanted to make a lot of movies and like worked with movie maker stuff, Canada has every grants possible. If I made a movie about a transgender disabled native that worked at a
on the reserve,
right, I would get $1 million in grants to make that movie.
I mean, not $1 million, but you can get money. I've gotten a lot of grant money.
Yeah, I mean, so it seems like you can make stuff. Then also, there's all these Canadian television stations, and then there's Nelvana and all of the Disney
and no one cares.
Yeah, so why is that? Why is Canada make all this great stuff?
I mean, I would make the argument that like, the government isn't the greatest at making making like decisions on who's going to be the best artist.
So it's just straight up statism. Okay.
It's worse now. I mean, government sanctioned art like tends to not be good.
It depends. I like some of the Soviet propaganda, and I like that movie Rock and Rule, which was this. Yeah,
and like these organizations have made, and there's good things they made in Canada too as well. But the bottom line is the same. The same reason why is every company come from why did every band come from Seattle in that pocket, or why did every tech company kind of come from San Francisco or
Sub Pop Records was in Seattle, so I mean,
right.
It's a
well,
record
Hollywood's
company.
in America.
Yeah,
and,
fair.
So Hollywood's in America. Every scene that matters is they can create their own little scenes, but they're if you look at the most popular comedians, there's whatever, like Joe Rogan universe or whatever you want to say, but they're all American. So
yeah, but Joe Rogan is kind of shown. I mean, it's true he's American, but Joe Rogan, and he's been on TV, so maybe, and that's kind of
there's no opportunity. Like there's just no opportunity. Like your best kid. Okay, it's the best way that I've heard it described is it's the same hustle and you have to work just as hard, but the pot of gold at the end of it's is substantially tinier. So it's like if you become up the comedy scene in Canada and you're like a top guy and a top headliner, your best bet is kind of you can make 40-50 grand a year touring the road. Maybe you get some of these top gigs, or you get some cushy gig at CBC and you're making 200-300 grand and still not really selling tickets, but you're kind of popular in Canada. These are whereas what the top people here are like Will Smith, and the top people in America are these just huge massive celebrities that are known every and that's like actors. And then on the comedian level, it's still like the Dave Chappelle's and the Louis C.K.'s or whatever, right? So it's just the magnitude's just so different. It's like it's a small little place, and also the biggest the reason why Canada's worse than other places like that. So if you take like Australia or New Zealand or even Quebec within Canada is a little like this, that they have their own culture. You know what I mean? They have their own language in a lot of ways that they speak with a different accent. Whereas in Canada, we don't have any of that stuff. So why would your favorite comedian be like some no-name guy in Canada? It'll just be the American people. So there's no real, the same reason why if you live in like Portland, your favorite comedian isn't some local Portland guy. Your favorite comedian's a Hollywood guy, or maybe not, that wasn't the best example, but you know what I mean? There's someone who lives in anywhere else in America that isn't, New York or LA or, even whatever, Austin or something. Your favorite comedian's still like a big American comedian. It's not like a local guy. Well, the same in Canada. If you think of it as like another extension of America, your favorite comedian isn't the guy who's on like the local television, which is the Canadian television. Your guy is still the Hollywood guy.
So is our goal then to take over Hollywood instead of building a new one? Because it seemed like for a while the goal was with podcasts and everything that we're trying to build something outside of Hollywood. Is it really just to take it over?
My goal isn't to take over Hollywood. My goal is more like individualistic, I think. So I think if I look at everything as like tools to accomplish what I want to accomplish, I think I will look at the best paths. So to me, I think it would be good to, I think that Hollywood is self-destructing. I mean, listen, if Hollywood was making great things and I think making like the right decisions and they were like a viable path for, the top comedians. And if you looked at it and you said, hey, look, the 20 biggest comedians in the world are all, doing this thing where they're moving to Hollywood and getting sitcoms and it's actually working out pretty good. I think that everyone would be fine with that. And they go, they picked the ones that were the right ones. And, and oh, look at, here's another guy. He kind of, he was the top guy and everyone kind of knew it. And he was this killer and he was making these videos. And then now he's doing his TV show and it's work. That path just doesn't exist anymore. So it's like, I don't even think of it. Like, I have managers and agents and stuff, and they always want me to do meetings with these companies. And I just say, why? Like, I don't see it. Like, I just don't see it. The same reason. And I've like been through this in Canada where it's like, I knew I needed to like make enough money to survive and stuff like that. But I knew that like Canadian industry system wasn't, like a viable, it wasn't the right path. There's better options. So I knew moving here was a better option. I know that, and to me, being like a comedian, especially if you actually care about the comedy, you don't want to essentially like try to work your way on a path to like a corporate path. And on top of that, like I'm saying wild stuff and I'm like a fucking white dude. Like I'm not going to try to, like, it's just be the most like uphill battle. So I think you like, I just don't want to fight. I wouldn't want to fight uphill battle in terms of like corporate structure, in terms of the medium. Like I don't, you have a time when the whole infrastructure is falling. I think the model of like making a TV show and making it like a huge success is, a smaller than what I was just from virtue of how people like consume content. So like the whole thing's changed and there are things falling apart and I'm not an attractive person to these people. So like, I just don't see any indication that it would be like a smart move for me to like ever
don't say
entertain that and then wasting my time.
You're totally beautiful. Speaking that
just seems like a waste of time for me. If I look at comedians, I do listen to like, I always say I relate everything back to music, but I try to look at like, business guys. And I think a lot of kind of tech dudes that have, accomplished a lot. And, even like the Tim Ferriss kind of guys of the world or whatever, like I try to use like the lessons that a lot of these guys have learned, which a lot of them come from fucking whatever, stoicism or other things. Right. But then you go like, where is like the energy that like I can capture and how can I make the impact? It's not looking in the past. It's like looking forward, or at least looking at now. So I can't help but segue with the Sue Johansson quote. Cause again, I toy with you by pretending I didn't watch a lot of Oxygen in Canadian television, but you remember Sex with Sue?
bruh, my obsession with Canada runs way too deep. I mean,
Sex with Sue, so funny.
You shouldn't wake up in the middle of the night thinking about Sue. If you did, you might have spent too much time.
Oh god, yeah, Sex with Sue is hilarious.
But at the same, and I was super down because I was like, wow, this is like she's like open, she's non-puritanical, etc.
Well, I mean, the bottom line for her quote, in my opinion, is just Canada's not a religious country.
Yeah, no, okay.
I think you could just like boil it all down to that. Like
that's right? that excuses everything I'm about to go into. But yeah, I mean, that's true. That's a big part of it. Even though you do have your French Catholicism and everything else, you lack that puritanical vibe. But did this lead to Hollywood becoming like the Toronto Canadian state film industry? Because now Hollywood's doing the same thing as Canada. We're 10 years behind you, right? Are we catching up in the wrong ways? Are we using our Americanisms to make it worse? But Hollywood seems
that wasn't a show for kids though. That was a show for adults. Like that was on at like 1 a.m.
I'm not here to talk about what we did wrong as children, but yeah, no, I think because California, that was a Toronto time to California time, man. I think we had 3 hours difference. So it was like probably like 11, 10, you shouldn't be 10 years old watching that, but
yeah, I think, you might. I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. Like wherever you grow up in, like you just think nothing of it. Like to me, like no one thought you go, I don't know. Like that was just funny. Like this fucking old bitch that talks about sex.
She was on like Degrassi. Funny. She was on Degrassi. So they're definitely kids knew about her because she was on Degrassi. See, and Degrassi was the fan for it,
I get I think got popular kind of doing, making fun of both sides videos or whatever. But yeah, there's like, I obviously there is like a whole war going on about, the level of sex, and it's also being like used, sex and gender is everything used as a tool of, as a amalgamation of a lot of things that are part of like a broader war or whatever. But with like the puritanical aspect, it's like there is like every group has their puritanical aspect, and like I feel like I do a bad job of like articulating what I'm trying to say, but it's like politics and commentators are morality enforcement is like a popular tool, but one thing that is an unintended consequence of morality enforcement is you lose the support and energy of artists and entrepreneurs and stuff like that. So I think that is what happened on the with religious Christians, and that's what happened with Hollywood with enforcing their puritanical thing. They lost the support of anyone who's new, energetic, and has a lot to say, and feels like they have a perspective that needs to be heard, especially, and these people are empowered by the fact that it feels like it's against them, and it gives you something to fight back against. And then I don't know what'll happen, but I've seen it a lot with the other way with this. Everyone's sort of like got on board with the cause that like, everyone's a groomer and all that stuff. And well, the same thing where they go, everyone's racist, and you go, not everyone's racist. The same you could put together the same reason Sean King puts together a compilation every day of a cop hitting a black guy. So every single day he posts a video of, racism happening, right? And every single day, if you wanted to, you could post a video of a wacky teacher or a pedophile or something like that, right? And doesn't mean that either of them are happening. I think that when movements get out of control, and then you start seeing it everywhere.
Yeah. So in terms of the way social justice warriors are becoming puritanical, are we going to see the same reaction? I mean, I don't know. In Canada, I don't know. Was there as much of a reaction?
No, there is not
it's just America's jihad is going to react on us badly. What do you think?
Think of Canada like California, right? So yeah, there is people that are, whatever, don't like liberals or whatever, but they're never going to win or anything,
They don't work hard.
Not to say conservatives do win sometimes in Canada, but politics are different right now. It's like a blood sport at the moment.
Dude, I can't believe Ford's still in power, and it's amazing. I mean, it's pretty interesting. What do you really think about Ford? I mean, I know he gets a bad
I don't like
rap.
him.
Okay, he does a lot of drugs.
I liked Rob Ford. No, that's Rob Ford.
Yeah, his brother. So his brother doesn't do drugs. His brother is sober.
No. Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he does, but like that's not his rap or whatever. So Rob Ford, who Americans probably know more, was the mayor of the smoke crack. Danny actually made a movie about him.
Right. Yeah. Love it. I was binging it. Yeah. It's funny.
Oh, really? Oh, sick. Yeah. So, Rob Ford was this like famous. He was like very man of the people, almost like Trump-esque before Trump, but he was a mayor, right? So, like if he was the president and it was the prime minister and it was a couple years later, he probably would have been like a very Trump hated figure. Like he was a tell like it is guy, but I think he was more likable than Trump, and not in the sense that he was almost like jolly. Like he was your kind of like drunk neighbor that was like a fun guy, but he wasn't like mean. Whereas a lot of Trump's like humor comes from, kind of like cruelty. Doesn't mean it's not funny. I mean, cruelty can be funny, like anything can be. But I think that just like, if you look at, you know what I mean? Rob Ford wasn't like that, but he was very like, drain the swamp, like all the language that Trump says like that. He was kind of saying all that stuff, which a lot of people have in the past. So his brother, I think, is him without the charm, kind of the same way that, Trump, like he can do these speeches and say mean things sometimes. Sometimes I see it. I don't think it was good, but sometimes like, sometimes I'm like, it was too cruel for how funny it was, but sometimes he does it, and he does have like the comedic talent and the like charisma or whatever to like pull off these jokes, which is why he wasn't just like, the most like vile human, right? Like, that's why people like him. But I think his brother is like him without the charisma.
That's a pretty good description, actually. So it sounds like,
and the charisma is so necessary. Yeah, so he's just like, I don't know, he's crappy. And he's one of those guys that just like, I don't know, he just like kind of, I guess this is every politician, but he just kind of goes with the wind. And I don't know, Canadians have like no balls.
Do you think that they took out Old Ford because of the fact he was trying to drain the swamp? Then are you saying he was?
No, he got cancer.
Okay, but he died. So I mean, in America at least, it's pretty common for a politician. I mean, Hugo Chavez, for instance, replaced with a much less personable character, Maduro. This is all after.
No, they're different jobs. So Rob Ford, again, like I said, Rob Ford was a mayor. Mm-hmm. So a mayor's very, very different. You know what I mean?
He's like the Grand Theft Auto mayor too. Yeah.
Like, honestly, like a mayor, but like they're talking about fucking, expanding the subway line, and like the mayor's not really in charge of solving racism.
Yeah, but Toronto isn't Toronto like the 6th largest economy in the world, and there's ports and everything. I mean, he had a lot
but the mayor, like, but so he's the like, his brother's the governor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So his brother's the governor, which is like more of a policy job. Like the mayor's, they're like almost like a figurehead in a lot of ways, like like he's almost a little better. This is why I did kind of like Andrew Yang when he was running for New York, because he was actually sort of talking about stuff. Like, to me, one of the biggest problems with politics is like, which is funny when you go to a big city versus small city. Like the big city's all like, the left is like, I'm going to stop racism and oppression and blah, blah, blah. And then the right is kind of like, we're going to take freedom back and, stop, shrink the government, which they'll never do. And then you kind of have the one guy that's like, we're going to fix the potholes on Main Street. and everyone's like, yeah, thank you, because that's the real thing we care about. Like, hey, we're gonna make sure we're gonna say remember the liquor stores have to be closed by 8. We're gonna say they can be open till 9 now. Like real shit that like actually anyone gives a shit about. So Rob Ford was a little bit like, hey, we're gonna make the subways, we're gonna like expand the subway line. And like when a mayor starts talking about that, and we like need this park needs to be clean, and we're going to put more garbage cans here, and like shit that like real people care about. So I think that's what he was pretty good at, that which is what he was saying. He's like, let's focus on fucking making the subway better and blah, blah, blah. Like, why do we need these like bloated bureaucracies in like the fucking Toronto, the Toronto like mayoral government that doesn't do anything. So I think that message is like popular everywhere, but it's maybe more realistic when you're talking about like a municipality.
That makes sense. I mean, I look at Canada though, and let me see if I can pull up this article. I'll start a little earlier. Actually, there's a few articles before this one. Canadian Spies. So we see NASA, Canada Space Force is the first one. They just established the Royal Canadian Air Force Brigade. Michael Anderson's directing of the
gay.
Yeah, right. I mean, so what about Canada in space? Is that a thing?
Oh yeah.
Are you guys gonna put maple syrup in space? Like, I hope so.
I think everyone, the Canada's so fucking lame, dude. When growing up, like we would have, like one astronaut that was like Canada, and we'd have to like, there'd be like commercials about him and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Poor Canada.
Like, yeah. We have commercials on Canadian TV that are paid for by the government that just like, I guess it would be the equivalent of any like person. The same reason that you might, it kind of reminds me of like how in America you'll see like people pay for commercials. It'll be like, just so you know, like the blender was invented by like a black guy, and they'll like, or like a woman or something like that. And it'll kind of be this whole thing. Canadians like fund a lot of that stuff. Will be like, just so you know, like basketball was invented by a Canadian, and it'll be like a whole commercial about it. We call it a Canadian heritage moment, but like millions of dollars went into these productions. I have friends in film, so I have friends that like work on them, but it's just to kind of like tell
Doesn't it
people
feel like
a
smoke screen though? I mean, like, because it's like to pretend Canada's maple syrup when you guys are having the CSIS, and it seems like there's a higher echelon of para-British and para-French too, because you've got bilingual. You can some Canadians who can properly speak French and English can go back and forth. You've got okay. I'm gonna make it make sense for a second. Here's Trump said he didn't know what a burner phone was, but clearly he does, and it's because the FBI honeypot Anam that was running to do kill switches on the Phantom Secure lines of these burner phones were found, and it showed that the national CSIS, or the Canadian intelligence, and the RCMP, which is I think the Royal Mountain Brigade.
Yeah.
Right? So I mean, that's them in the FBI. So I get it. The FBI doesn't wear cool outfits that look like toy soldiers
ride
on horseback, but that isn't that kind of a smokescreen. Anyway, RCMP official accused of leaking secrets going to trial September 2022. Cameron J. Ortis is this Canadian RCMP senior intelligence officer. So they're not all on horseback. Was caught using these burner phones, connected with Virgil Griffith. Virgil Griffith is one of the world's most important, these most famous hackers. He's an Ethereum crypto builder. He built the wiki scanner system for Wikipedia, which makes it searchable. It's like a Google kind of search engine thing. And he went to North Korea and told them how they could use Ethereum and cryptocurrencies to escape sanctions. On his return, he was arrested and he was sentenced to 5 years in jail for his North Korean trip. Vitali tried to get him out and get him leniency, but nobody would back it. So he's basically screwed. And then right afterwards, the FBI said North Korean hackers stole, this just happened last month, 600 million in cryptocurrency in a single hack. And they're targeting NFTs, and they're using all of these tools that were passed along from Virgil through what's his name from the Canadian Five Eyes connection CIS. So
right.
I mean,
well, you might be on that's a pretty good yarn wall that you've put together there.
that was a red string. I agree.
Yeah, I mean that's good. I guess I like a good conspiracy, but I guess that and a lot of them are true, but there could easily be somewhere premised in a lot of that stuff that was the link. Like, let's say, for example, is it possible that RCMP guy, his job had nothing to do with his corruption? Like, you know what I mean? Like, let's say that you had a bunch of cops that were working with the mafia, right? To now say that the Toronto police force is in cahoots with the mafia, and to put them it's very possible that it's the individuals and not the actual RCMP. And the RCMP don't wield a lot of power, right? They're essentially ceremonial. It's all, or yes, I think ceremonial is the word. But you know what I mean? In most places they just kind of go around and they're not even they don't even do anything. On the West Coast, I think they have more power, but it's as far as I know, there isn't these massive power bodies in Canada. There is, America has massive power centers that are ripe for, corruption and useful to take over. I don't know if Canada has if you infiltrated it. I mean, I don't know if you infiltrated the RCMP to take over it. I don't even know if it's that much power.
That's interesting.
You'd be better off being able to infiltrate some small government in America. I feel they don't have a crazy amount of power, but it's very possible that those are individuals operating that also are part of both, that organization. But also it's possible you say, I'm not.
I definitely not saying that every Canadian citizen is involved in espionage. I mean, even though that would be a cool movie, I'm not saying that that's what's happening. I got a obscure kind of question. There's this AI program that a friend of mine's been working on, and it's a way to tell if you're an asshole. So I'm wondering, do you have can you think of a story in your life where you were thinking to yourself, man, am I the asshole here? Or I feel like I was right, but was I wrong? Or can you think of some political or social commentary thing to ask this? And we're going to ask it whether or not we're the asshole for asking it that or telling it that.
I think the most one that people have is probably with their parents, where you're just you know what I mean? Whether that's the parents cutting off the kids or the kids cutting off the parents, that's the biggest one where you're kind of let's say, let's say my parents were rich and didn't give me any money, and then I never spoke. So I decided to cut them out of my life. You know what I mean? Like those kind of things. I feel like so many people are like tortured by the idea of whether the asshole for the interactions with their kids or parents. Family's probably the biggest one.
Here we go. And so here's my parents are abusive. I don't have the energy to go into it really, but if you have the means, I recommend cutting them out of your life. I can see why you got that reaction from them. As a matter of fact, if my parents, I would be doing just that. But you need to understand that your parents aren't bad people. They just didn't prepare for the real world. They gave you an advantage. So this democratizes answers from Reddit and kind of answers random questions in a pretty decent
So which
way.
one did so what it does is it gives you 3 versions of it.
Yeah, it gives you the not an asshole, the asshole, and the toss-up. And it tries to get the best one. If you don't want to see them, that's your choice, but don't complain when you see them again in heaven. So it's found somebody's answer and it's put it as this is the toss-up.
So what's the version where you are an asshole? It says
I can see why you got that reaction from them. As a matter of fact, if I was my parents, I would be doing just that. If this was my parents, I'd be doing
which is not giving the money kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I could do a regenerate results.
I kind of didn't get what that meant.
You were a big asshole and just want to be independent from them in case they give you more money. Is an expansion.
In case they give you more money?
Yeah. Let's see. These are voted up. Your parents are not responsible for your problems, and cutting them out of your life doesn't guarantee that all the horrible things in the world will stop happening to you. It's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always that other thing of people like, what were you? What was the like? I'm always like sort of trying to like drill down whenever I'm talking to people, especially like other people that are trying to like accomplish something. I'm always trying to drill down like, what was your goal? You know what I mean? So it's, to be honest, like if you felt like it was hurting your goal, and then you're kind of making you're just making a cost benefit analysis of like, all right, well, how am I wired mentally? Like, how much energy is this taking of me? And like, will I be better off? And can I live with that, I guess? So it's like, maybe sometimes there isn't an asshole or not asshole. It's like choices that people make and then consequences, good and bad, from them.
Do you like the democratization, the Shawian approach, or would you prefer a more stoic? How do you feel about utilitarianism?
Yeah, I don't think that there is always, there's obviously a fucking, situation by situation, right? But like, if you go, I was at the store and this guy shortchanged me and then I yelled at him and like, who was the asshole? Like, you're the asshole. But that doesn't mean that person is an asshole. They could have just been an asshole at that moment.
That's true. Do you think in general though, can you approximate through other people's opinions on a circumstance, the way this is choosing other people's opinions or in perspective?
If they have all the information, but they don't.
Yeah, since they don't, I mean, does you use metrics a lot. So do you think utilitarianism makes sense? Are you one of those people that says, I should step in front of a bus and die because it'll save 1,000 people, or, the greater good for the greater many? Are you one of those, or
no?
What's the flaw with that for you?
I think the flaw would be the should part, because I think the flaw would be that you can, and if you're like value structures as such, right? I think the flaw is that you should. So I think that anything that starts to, tell you what you should do is doesn't make sense to me, because, well, what if, you could now put a situation where you go, okay, I stepped in front of the bus and I died and it saved 7 people. It's like, okay, well, what if those 7 people went and killed a bunch of people and I was going to start a hospital? Well, then that wasn't a better move. So you can't just like, if you're gonna make those value judgments, the best you can do is make percentage calls.
So when you say percentage calls,
could say that if every scenario of you go, okay, I'm stepping in front of 5 people. This is everything we know about what I might accomplish. This is what we know about what those 5 people are going to do. Now we say, well, how do we value those? Like what's saving a life valued? What's like creating wealth valued? We have to put value judgments on everything in terms of what's better or worse. And then, but that's all stepping away from the fact that or do we just say a life's a life? But we don't think that, because we all probably would agree that killing a 2-year-old's worse than killing a 95-year-old. So we do, like, no one really believes that like all lives are equal. So it is, so it's like so once we admit that it's not binary, well, then now it's like infinite, there's infinite now, possibilities that we could add into that equation to decide whether it was better for the greater good. And I think that's like the problem with a lot of greater good arguments, is that they take a number of the factors and then act like they're the only factors.
So, I mean, if you're so open to subjective morality, or this idea that morality is an anthropological projection, then...
I don't necessarily think that I'm open. I think that there's objectivity to morality. I mean, because we can, I mean, if we say that, some guy's walking down the street and then you go kill him, I like, hey, someone rapes a bunch of kids. Like, I don't think that's like subjectively bad. I think that's objectively immoral.
But I mean, so you're saying,
but it kind of goes back to our argument.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think you made a good point that. So yeah, so that goes back to, I was just saying that goes back to like the beauty point, where it was like, just because there is some ambiguity in the center doesn't mean the other. So I see what you're saying, where it's like
symmetry still exists, but the should goes
okay,
away.
So the should, let me like step back one farther from the should being the problem. It's probably a better description is someone giving you a should is the problem. So it's not the fact that like internally giving yourself a should, or that there isn't a universal truth of a should. It's the problem that there's like a body that decides that they'll be the ones who decide the should. And it's kind of usually where it falls apart. Because then we get, like you said, it starts with the should of someone shouldn't rape kids, right? And then you end up with like, am I legally obliged to jump in front of a bus if it's going to save people? So I think that, I guess the like what happens next is the reason why the shoulds are a slippery slope. So you end up a lot of times with the original should is fine if it's self-imposed, but when it starts to be imposed. But again, I don't disagree that there should be like laws and crime.
Yeah. What about
like,
special elite? So let's say instead of
but here's the thing, like, I don't think that you need, okay. So I think the morality doesn't necessarily, okay. So if we're making criminal laws of a society or whatever, right? The morality component is like part of the lobby for what happens, but it isn't really necessary. It's just that, hey, we're going to live in a society. And you could make the same argument that we're making laws that help a society function, right? You go, hey, like you could come to those same conclusions without morality. And I think that's where, I guess that's like objectivism or whatever too, to some degree. And maybe I'm like, flimsing in between philosophies in like a way that's not that coherent, but you could probably get to the conclusion that society, should have a law against murder to function properly without having to have that debate of whether it's moral or not. I mean, I think just from a functional level, that would be a good law.
But then, so let's say you've got people stopping at stoplights because everyone's, if you don't stop at stoplights, people die, right? So it's just, you have
right.
To
so
have
there would be an example. Yeah, that would be an example. Yeah, I think that would be an example where it's like, I don't think that we really need to have so if we go, well, why should you stop at stoplights? Yeah, it's because, well, that's how society functions, not because it's like the right thing to do, So I think that like,
then you have the special elite who have sirens so they can pass through the stoplights. So what about people that don't have to live up to the same standards of morality or social?
That's exactly, which is why I'm removing the morality from it, because it doesn't hold up to scrutiny when you're like actually saying, So I say like the morality is a good tool to like lobby, and it's a good tool to get people what you want to do them emotionally. But I think things work better when they're structured from like functional principles. That was not bad, right?
Yeah, that was pretty good. I was going to use it to say this is proof, I think, that everyone here was without moral. I mean, this was pretty bad. Men gang rape and kill and eat endangered monitor lizard.
Sorry, what were you going to say? Say that again. Say that again.
Just men gang rape, kill and eat endangered monitor lizard. I don't know if you're seeing this screen here.
Yeah.
But this kind of shows me that there's I think all were victims here, but all were guilty. I mean, look at what the lizard's wearing, but at the same time, then they ate the lizard, which is just out of control. So I mean, but at the same,
but could you not like come at that from like almost like a but could you not come at that from like a liberty principle in the same way that it's like, you know, animals don't have the same sovereignty as human, but there is like no animals, you're not allowed to violate them. You know what I mean? So then it comes from, you know, the morality always comes from like the victimizer, not the victim, right? But so I guess it's a matter of like, is it a matter of like rights, or is it a matter of rules?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that the world will end up better off in authority, or in a, like, you know, Western authoritarianism is authoritarian? Do you think that it is a rule of order, a new world order, or is there something about sovereignty that matters more? Like, what's the solution here?
I think it depends on the culture, and that's why I know it always sounds like I'm giving like wishy-washy answers sometimes when I speak like this.
No, I like it. I like that we're doing this.
It's like the idea of like going to China and just saying, hey, you know, we're gonna, you know, introduce some libertarian utopia, like, and you say, oh, it's better. Like, well, for who? They don't want that. Like, you know, it depends on the culture, and it depends on how people are, right? It depends on the principles. Like I might, you know, if let's say without it being true, we say that without whether or not it's true, if we were to able to have an application that said the perfect world, right? And then you said the perfect world by all measures, where we were able to say happiness, wealth, let's say we actually were able to have this computer program, and it actually turns out that the perfect world was one where they don't have religion. So what, you're going to go to now some super religious city and say like, hey, we're imposing all this stuff because it was actually the perfect world. It's like, well, they don't want that. So I think that, but maybe that would be in your application. Maybe I guess maybe you could put that into your computer program where you're like, well, then you'd probably end up being like, if you were including factors like, well, what people's ability to change, then you're probably your computer simulation would give you something not that different from now. So if you're just saying in absence of what people want, we know what's best for them, what would be the best, and you ended up with something, and it's like, well, a lot of people wouldn't want it. So I mean, that's why it's like, I think it's a little more complicated, and it changes too, like what level of industrialized the country is, like what level of wealth, what level of industrialization. That's why I always think like liberty is sometimes like can be one medicine. It's not just like, it can be like medicine for like a problem, but it's not always the same reason. Kurt Metzger, who I think he's like a good friend of mine that's a comic, and he has like the best comedy analogy, where some people, he says like comedy can be like medicine in the sense that it's often like to relieve stress or whatever, what it's actually for at its core. And a lot of times people will be like, oh, I hated this comedy special because I thought it was racist. Or maybe I hated this comedy special because it was like pussy comedy talking about fucking how he's depressed or whatever. It's like, well, that was like medicine and you took the wrong medicine. It was like, you went and like took the wrong medicine and you're like, this medicine doesn't work. He's kind of saying he had like it wasn't for you in that sense. And I think that's like a good way to sometimes think of like a lot of principles. Like, hey, if you have a society if you have like some libertarian society and you legitimately have 10,000 people that are trillionaires and everyone else is homeless, let's say, I guess the argument would be that, well, you wouldn't, that's how great it is. But let's say you did. I mean, it'd be hard to now make the argument that what you need is more liberty. Like the argument would be, what we want is someone to take this thing over and redistribute the wealth. So I think that everything, they kind of are like medicine for when it goes too far. So I know people, I'm too much of like, maybe I always kind of like a balanced person, but I think that that's how I look at my like individual life. And I think that there's something to be said about that so it's like a lot of these like structural systems have this idea that like, then we reach this utopia, whereas probably what actually happens in reality, it's like a fight that never ends and hasn't ended in history and never will.
Have you noticed how most of the futurist films are about dystopias? The future, something changes and it's bad. And the only way to fix society is to get out of the change and to return to tradition. And almost
like conservatism,
everything, Matrix, even the Matrix is about returning to order of tradition by getting away from the Matrix, which is, everything is the future is made a bad choice. And we need
right. But if you look at the past, there's been both.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if, kind of the church's corrupt rule at, different places and different parts, removal of that would have been like a removal of tradition that, in some places had positive outcomes, or, corrupt governments, that had like a crazy, I mean, if North Korea got like, let's say, if like the Kim Jong-un was removed from North Korea, and then in 40 years from now, it was like a way more flourishing place and people had more money and they were happier, that would have been like a situation where it was like the removal of tradition.
So in terms of
just gets replaced with tradition, just gets replaced with new tradition.
Yeah. So you mean as medicine goes, you're making comedy in medicine. Do you think, how much are you shaping the future? Do you think that this is working and that we're able to, obviously the videos you've made have directly impacted the conversation about social justice, about plasticity of gender, all of these things do you think that is the impact, and how much of an effort, how long is it going to take for this new tradition to form because of the content that you and we are all trying to produce?
I think that has to be like irrelevant to me. And I think that when you start thinking about, I'm making this stuff to accomplish this goal, the stuff will start to suck. So I think that I look at, and I think that that's happens over both always. Right. So I think that I more look at it as like, I'm, what I do like to do is the person that, just, let's say some person that just like goes to work every day or whatever, and they start being like hearing all this stuff, and maybe they're in sort of a bubble and they're just like, am I crazy? And then maybe they like listen to the podcast or come to my show and they're like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. Just the same way that someone might be at a workplace and everything, they're like, this boss is such an idiot, and why they're running this place to the ground, and and then maybe you just have one friend there that also thinks that, and just going to this person and daily and being like, oh, you can't wait to hear what they did today, like, and that person like sees it how you see it, and you're like, they're running this place to the ground. And so as opposed to, so having that friend to me is the thing that I'm trying to provide, not trying to provide the like, hey, what if the two of us now could wrangle this person? Maybe we could change this country. Like, it's just not what I'm like trying to do. What I think that like a good, so I don't want to put more value on like what I provide than I do. It's like, I'm trying to make funny things, and I think that might like make someone's day better potentially. And then hopefully, and that's still like an unintended consequence, but I think that that's more on the right track of what like comedy can be at its best.
I think you said it perfectly when you said, it starts to suck when you change the intention to when you force feed people things, and that's what's happening in Hollywood, and that's what's happening in all the medias in the world. Ryan, I love that you came to do this. I really appreciate that you took the time. This has been awesome.
Thanks, man. Hopefully I wasn't boring.
No. So
we got into I also I feel so stupid sometimes when I talk about this stuff, because I feel like I have a lot of guiding principles that like go through my life, and you kind of go through all these things that come out with comedy, but then anyone who's actually smart's like, fucking Socrates said that 4 years ago. And you'll be like, you have these huge theories, and you're like, yo, maybe this is that. And someone's like, oh yeah, that's this book. And you're all right.
It still
Like,
works out. I
everything-
mean, Machine Gun Kelly recently saying, "All I know is I don't know nothing," and that's literally Socrates, and he made number one.
yeah.
So stick to Socrates. That's a good way to go.
Well, I'll tell you what I do. Well, that's what when you goes back and forth, where it's like everyone's saying they're corrupting the youth, right? Like that's what Socrates, everyone got so mad at him. Like, what was he killed for? Corrupting the youth, right? Well, the right's saying the left's corrupting the youth, and the left's saying the right's corrupting the youth because it's fucking like that works.
Yeah, and traditions are both disintegrating. So neither one of them is even the new left and the new right. But okay, where can we find you? I know you're doing you know, we can always go to your YouTube but what else are you doing right now? I know you've got like some shows coming up and everything.
Yeah, I'm on tour. I think Tampa Bay next weekend, and then San Diego, Cincinnati, and a couple more. And I'm announcing more dates. And then everything's at youtube.com/Ryan Long Comedy. And my podcast is the Boys Cast with Ryan Long.
Boys
It's like a
Cast
comedy podcast.
ultimate right now is Boys Cast. Everyone should be listening to Boys Cast.
Thanks, buddy.
It's the way to get up to. Thanks, buddy. Yeah,
That's Canadian, eh?
I tell you, man, I love Canada. Oh, Canada.
Yeah, it comes out. I'm actually doing a Canadian video for the first time. Well, I did a Justin Trudeau street thing, but it was not necessarily like you didn't need to be Canadian. It was like culture that had made it to America. But I'm doing a Canadian video next week for the first time, which is the Canadian truckers have a message for China. Like they're like Canadian trucker convoys threatening to go to China, but it's all like Canadian inside jokes that's the first one I've done that's like pure Canadian shit.
I've been trying to work on something for a while about Canadian celebrities, and it's literally kind of about the microcosm and how, you know, you could go to a restaurant and someone's like, "Excuse me," and you're like, yeah, no, I'm that guy. No, can you move your chair? Like,
exactly. Whereas if like George Clooney shows up in Toronto, like that, like it's news. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like him being in Toronto is news.
That's a tragedy. Well, all right, Ryan, I appreciate that you came. We'll talk to you soon, man. God bless.
All right, thanks, buddy.
Peace.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.